Kלים Perik Yud Mishnah Hey, and we move on. And as I said to you at the beginning of the Perik, we're now going to leave the Mesechta of Kלים a little bit and enter, for the next 10 Mishnahs at least, enter a new area to do with Shiurim and how these Shiurim affect, how these Shiurim are measured. And there's actually a cut through of a lot of Shas here. Let's start. In the beginning of the Perik, we mentioned something called a Moitzi Rimoin, which is the size of a Kli Eitz becomes Torah if it has a hole the size of a pomegranate. What we never discussed is actually what does this pomegranate look like, the actual shear of a Rimoin. And the Mishnah is going to continue after this Mishnah to the famous Shurim of Beitza and Kazais. Says the Mishnah, Rimoin she'omru. The Rimoin that we're talking about is loy koton v'loy godol elo beinini. Sounds very simple. It's an average Rimoin. Not a small one, not a big one, but an average Rimoin. That's not very, very helpful. And how do we know what's called an average Rimoin? The actual method of working out an average size fruit we'll see in Mitzvah Shem in the next Mishnahs, which deal with a Beitza and a Kazais. Just in case you're really, really curious, the halacha will end up being that it's hakol lefi date shel roya. It's not an exact science. You've just got to try the best yourself and find out the shear of a Rimoin. Now, this is actually quite unusual. We're dealing here with something, with literally, when you think a matter of life and death. How can the size of a Rimoin and getting it right or wrong affect the person's chiyuv misa? If, for instance, you have a keli which has the hole, and the keli is actually, you think the keli is tohor, but in fact the keli can actually be makabel tumah. If that keli would be in the room in the mess, that keli would have a din of a chalal cherev. The keli would become an aviyah voisa tumah. The man touching it would then become tomei. If you were to go into the Beis HaMikdash, you'd be chayav koros. So actually, these shiurim are really, really important to get them right, because chas v'sholem, getting them wrong could lead to tremendous problems. But anyway, the Mishnah tells us here that it's a beinani, which we know is hakol lefi date shel roya. We'll discuss more about Shurim and Mitzvah Shem when we come to the Shurim of Kazais and Beitza later on. And the Mishnah carries on. Ulama huzkuru rimoine badon. You may have heard, here we're dealing just with a straightforward pomegranate or rimoin. Other places in Shas, we have the expression a rimoine badon, rimoine from the place of badon. Says the Mishnah, what's that about? Says the Mishnah, that's for a different din in Gansen. Shehu mekadshin kol shein divrei Rabbi Meir. We're now into the dinim of bittul here. Min Torah, everything is bottle chad betray 1 and 2 with a roiv. Midrabanon, they said that in certain circumstances things do not become bottle. For instance, if you have what's called a dover shebe minyan, a dover choshev, something which is so important, it's always counted singly. It's got such a chashivas that they said that these things never become bottle. And the Mishnah in Ola reckons out a list of those things that are considered to be dvorim chashuvim and never become bottle. And there you find the rimoine badon, pomegranates from the town of Badon, are one of these dvorim chashuvim. Says the Mishnah, for that purpose only these rimoinim are mentioned. Shu mekadshin kol shein, the word mekadeshe means to asa, kol shein means even 1 in 1,000, divrei Rabbi Meir. Now there's many, many views in the Tanoim and the Mishnahs as to exactly this class of objects called the dover shebe minyan. About Rabbi Meir's view himself, there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish and Beitza Daf Gimel, and Rabbi Meir actually, both according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, actually has a bigger variety, a bigger selection of items that are dover shebe minyan, more than the classic 6 or 7 mentioned there. But according to Rabbi Meir, whatever happens, Rimoine Badon, the Rimoinim from a place called Badon are definitely a dover shebe minyan, and therefore asa even 1 in 1,000. However, ordinary Rimoinim are not even a dover shebe minyan, even according to Rabbi Meir, and they become bottle under the normal rule of chad betray. And the Mishnah carries on. So Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, Rimoine Badon are only relevant for the din of bittul. Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri Omer says no. The Shire Bohen Es HaKedim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri holds that even for our Mishnah, the size of a hole, which makes a Kli Eitz Tahor, which we said is a Moitzi Rimoin, that Rimoin is not the classic Rimoin. It's actually, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Uri, Halacha l'Moshe Misinai, it's the more Choshev Rimoin of the Rimoine Badon. The exact size of these Rimoini Badon, whether they're bigger or smaller than the ordinary Rimoin, is not known. But they were more choshev, maybe because of their size. Rabbi Kiva Omer, he says, Lekach ulekach huzkaru. It's actually, he says, I'm going to hold out both the above shittas. In other words, Rabbi Kiva holds that Rimoini Badon is actually one of the 6 items mentioned in Orlo, where it says these are Dover Sheba Minyan, and Rabbi Kiva is the Mtana mentioned in that Mishnah, and therefore he says Rimoini Badon. Yes, I agree, Rimoini Badon is a Dover Choshuv and it's not bottled, even 1 in 1,000. But he says it's also the Rimoinim used for the dinim of Moitzi Rimoin for Al Masechta. L'shayar b'nes Kelim, it's used for the Kli 8, the Yehu Mekachin Kol Shein, and they also asa 1 in 1,000. Then we have the last year in the Mishnah, Omar Rabbi Yossi. He says, Loi huzkru rimoinei badon v'chatzeirei geva elo sheyu misasrin vadai b'chol mokim. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi doesn't comment about rimoinei badon for the rule of taras kelim, nor does he comment about rimoinei badon or any rimoinim for the use of mekachin v'kol shein. It's not known what Rabbi Yossi holds. There is a gersa that this is not Rabbi Yossi, it's Rabbi Yehuda. The Rash proves that Rabbi Yehuda actually holds, as far as Kiddush is concerned, Kiddush meaning Bittul, that Rimoinim, ordinary Rimoinim, and Rimoinim Badon are all the same L'chumra, that they're never bottled. Says Rabbi Yehuda, but so if so, what's special about Rimoinim Badon? He says Rimoinim Badon is for a different din in Gansen. Rimoinim Badon, pomegranates from the place called Badon, and Chatzeiri Geva, Chotzir, Chotzir is the word mentioned in the Baloischa as a Chotzir. It's a type of grass, of an important edible grass, vegetable. Geva, from a place called Geva. The reason why those 2 fruits and vegetables are singled out from all other fruits and vegetables for another din of Maisa. Remember, there's a rule of Demai. Whenever you buy Paris or Yerokas from an Amoritz, the assumption is, Midrabanon, you have to assume that maybe they haven't been Masa. Therefore you take Truma, you take Masa, Sheni, Misofik. Chumas Masa Sheni Misofik. That's when you buy from an Amoritz. However, these places, Badon and Geva, were places where the Kutim lived. Now the Kutim, although they may have taken Chumas and Mashas for themselves, were not makbid on the lava of Lefne Iver and Sitin Mirshal. So when they sold stuff, it definitely was not Masad. And therefore when you bought vegetables and fruits from Kutim, you had to take Masa Midoi Raisa, the whole whack, Truma and Chumas, Maisa, Risha, Maisa, the whole lot. And if you buy Rimoini and Chotzir from Badon and Geva, Shemis Asrin Vadai B'chol Mokim, you have to assume these are not Masad, and take Chumas and Masa B'teres Vadai from B'chol Mokim, wherever part in Eretz Yisrael you buy them, because they were recognizable that these Rimoinim and this Chotzir came from those places where the Kutim lived, called Badon and Geva. And that's Mishnah Hey. And then Mitzvah Shem, we carry on to Beitza and then